July 17th, 1941. Dawn. A bridge over the Dobrast River near the village of Sokolnishi, Belarus. 20-year-old Senior Sergeant Nikolai Sirotinin crouches beside a Soviet 76mm ZIS-3 anti-tank gun. The gun is perfectly positioned on a hilltop, hidden in thick summer rye. From here, he can see the highway stretching toward the bridge. On either side of the road, marshland and swamps make it impossible for heavy vehicles to leave the pavement. Anyone crossing that bridge has to come straight at him. No flanking, no evasion, just a killing zone. Beside Nikolai stands his battalion commander, wounded but refusing to leave. They've been ordered to hold this position temporarily while the 409th Regiment retreats. Fire a few shots to slow the German advance, make them cautious, then fall back and rejoin the unit. Simple mission, standard delaying action. Then, as the sun rises, they see it. A German armored column approaching from the west. Not a small patrol, not a reconnaissance element, an entire formation. Tanks, armored personnel carriers, trucks full of infantry. 57 vehicles total. The 4th Panzer Division under General Heinz Guderian, the man who invented Blitzkrieg, the most feared tank commander in the Wehrmacht, and they're heading straight for Nikolai's bridge. Nikolai sights down the gun's barrel, waits for the lead tank to reach the bridge. Fires, the shell hits perfectly. The tank erupts in flames and stops dead on the bridge. Before the Germans can react, Nikolai traverses the gun and fires at the rear of the column, destroys an armored personnel carrier. The entire column is now trapped, can't move forward past the burning tank, can't reverse past the destroyed vehicle, can't leave the road because of the swamps. They're stuck. And Nikolai has 58 shells remaining. What happens in the next 2.5 hours becomes one of the most extraordinary individual stands in military history. One man, one gun, 57 German vehicles. A legend that the Germans themselves documented. Before we dive into those 150 minutes of hell, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. And if you're enjoying these deep dives into real World War II stories, hit that subscribe button. These videos take serious research, and your support makes it possible to bring you more incredible history. Nikolai Vladimirovich Sirotinin was born in 1921 in Oryol, Russia, working-class family. Before the war, he worked at the Kostroma machine-building plant. Just a regular factory worker. Nothing remarkable about his life until June 22, 1941, when Germany launched Operation Barbarossa and invaded the Soviet Union with 3 million men, 3,600 tanks, and 700 aircraft. The largest invasion force in human history. Within weeks, German forces had penetrated hundreds of miles into Soviet territory. The Red Army was in full retreat. Entire armies surrounded and destroyed. Millions of soldiers killed, captured, or missing. On June 22nd, the first day of the invasion, Nikolai was wounded in an air raid. The wound was minor. Within days, he was back in action, assigned to the 55th Rifle Regiment, 6th Rifle Division, as a gunner on a 76mm artillery piece. His regiment was stationed near Krishev in Belarus, directly in the path of Guderian's advancing panzers. For 2 weeks, Nikolai's unit held defensive positions along the Dobrast River. During that time, the local villagers got to know the young soldiers. Olga Verzhbitskaya, a resident of Sokolnishi, later remembered Nikolai as very polite, always helped elderly women with carrying water from wells and other difficult work. Just a quiet, polite 20-year-old kid. Then came July 17th. The German advance was unstoppable. Soviet forces were retreating all along the front. Nikolai's regiment received orders to fall back immediately. The Germans were too close, too strong. Staying meant death or capture, but someone had to delay them. By time for the main force to escape, the battalion commander asked for volunteers to man the artillery piece and cover the retreat. Nikolai stepped forward immediately. The commander stayed with him initially. Together, they positioned the 76mm gun perfectly, hidden in the rye field on the hilltop. clear view of the highway and bridge. Swampy terrain on both sides preventing vehicles from leaving the road. It was a perfect ambush position. When the German column appeared at dawn, Nikolai and his commander executed the plan perfectly. First shot destroyed the lead tank on the bridge. Next shot destroyed the rear vehicle. The column was trapped. Mission accomplished. Time to retreat. But then the commander was wounded. Shrapnel from German return fire. He could barely stand. He ordered Nikolai to help him retreat, ordered him to abandon the gun and fall back to the regiment. Nikolai looked at his commander, looked at the ammunition, 58 shells, looked at the trapped German column, made his decision. He told the commander to go. He was staying. The commander protested. One man can't fight an entire panzer division. It's suicide. Retreat is an order. Nikolai refused. He physically helped the wounded commander start walking east towards Soviet lines. Then he returned to the gun. Alone, the Germans were still in chaos. Tanks trying to push past the burning wreck on the bridge. Infantry dismounting from trucks, trying to locate the enemy gun. Armored vehicles attempting to leave the road, getting stuck in the marsh. Nikolai started firing methodically. One shell, one target, reload, aim, fire. A tank tries to cross the bridge. Destroyed. Another tank attempts to ford the river. Gets stuck. Destroyed. An armored personnel carrier turns off the road, sinks into the swamp. Destroyed. The Germans finally realized they were dealing with a single gun, not an artillery battery, not a defensive line, one gun. They focused all their firepower on the rye field. Machine guns, tank cannons, mortars. The rye field erupted in explosions and fire, but they couldn't pinpoint Nikolai's exact location. The smoke from the burning tanks obscured their view. The thick rye hid the gun's muzzle flash. Nikolai kept firing. German infantry tried to advance on foot. Nikolai switched to high-explosive shells and shredded them. Two more tanks tried to get around the bridge using a narrow section of the marsh. Both got bogged down, both destroyed. The German column was now completely immobilized. Vehicles burning. Infantry pinned down. Officers screaming orders that nobody could execute. For 2.5 hours, this continued. Nikolai firing, Germans dying. The highway became a junkyard of destroyed vehicles and dead soldiers. Eyewitnesses later described the scene as apocalyptic, thick black smoke from burning tanks, the constant boom of the 76mm gun, screams, explosions, chaos, and through it all, one 20-year-old factory worker from Oriol, methodically destroying the 4th Panzer Division vehicle by vehicle. Finally, the Germans located his position. They concentrated all remaining firepower on that hilltop. Tanks, machine guns, mortars. The rye field was obliterated. Nikolai's ammunition ran out. He had 3 shells left when they found him. He fired all 3, hit all 3 targets. Then he grabbed his rifle. The Germans called for his surrender, loudspeaker in Russian. "You fought well. Surrender. You'll be treated as a prisoner of war." Nikolai's response was rifle fire. He wasn't surrendering. He was a Soviet soldier. He would fight until he couldn't fight anymore. The Germans stormed his position. Nikolai was killed firing his rifle at approaching infantry. When the Germans finally overran the hilltop and found what they'd been fighting, they couldn't believe it. One man, one gun, one dead Soviet sergeant surrounded by spent shell casings. They counted the damage. 11 tanks destroyed. 7 armored vehicles destroyed. 57 German soldiers dead, caused by one man in 2.5 hours. Senior Lieutenant Friedrich Henfeld, an officer in the 4th Panzer Division, wrote in his diary that evening, July 17, 1941, Sokolniki near Krishev. In the evening, an unknown Russian soldier was buried. He stood alone by the cannon and shot the column of tanks and infantry and died. He could have retreated, could have saved himself, but he remained at his post until death. The Germans buried Nikolai Sirotinin with military honors, full ceremony. They recovered his body from the hilltop, dug a grave near the road, fired a salute. German soldiers who'd been trying to kill him 2 hours earlier now stood at attention as he was buried. Why? Because they recognized what they'd witnessed. Extraordinary courage, a warrior's death. honor transcending nationality. For the next 16 years, Nikolai Sirotinin's story was known only to the Germans who fought him and the Soviets who retreated past his position. His family didn't know how he died, didn't know where he was buried. He was just one of the millions of Soviet soldiers listed as killed in action during 1941. Missing, location unknown. Then, in 1957, a Soviet journalist named Mikhail Fedorovich Melnikov began investigating. He'd heard rumors, stories from veterans about a lone gunner who'd held off an entire German column. Melnikov tracked down survivors, found German records, found Henfeld's diary, confirmed the story. In 1958, the Soviet newspaper Ogoniok published the full account. Nikolai's family learned for the first time how their son had died. In 1948, Nikolai's remains had been reburied in a mass grave in Khrushchev along with other Soviet soldiers. In 1960, he was posthumously awarded the Order of the Patriotic War, First Class. In 1961, a monument was erected at the site of his stand near Sokolnishi, a real 76mm gun mounted on a pedestal. An obelisk with an inscription, "Here, at the dawn of July 17, 1941. Senior Sergeant of Artillery Nikolai Vladimirovich Sirotinin engaged in a 2-hour battle with a column of enemy tanks and repulsed all enemy attacks, sacrificing his life for the freedom and independence of our motherland." A street in Khrushchev was named after him. So why didn't Nikolai receive the Hero of the Soviet Union, the USSR's highest honor, bureaucracy? To formally award the title, the Soviet military required a photograph of the recipient. They didn't have one. Nikolai's sister, Tasia Shestakova, later recalled, "We had only one photo of him from his passport, then it was damaged and he took it with him. The photograph was lost. Without it, the official award couldn't be processed." So Nikolai Sirotinin, who single-handedly destroyed 11 tanks and killed 57 enemy soldiers, received a lesser decoration because of missing paperwork. That's war bureaucracy. The story raises obvious questions. Could one man really hold off an entire division? Some historians are skeptical, argue the numbers are exaggerated, point out that Soviet propaganda often inflated individual heroism. But the German records confirm it. Henfeld's diary is genuine. The 4th Panzer Division War Diary for July 17, 1941, records the incident, describes encountering unexpected and fierce resistance from a well-positioned anti-tank gun that caused significant casualties and delay. The Germans had no reason to exaggerate Soviet heroism. They documented it because they couldn't ignore it. The tactical situation also makes sense. A 76mm ZIS-3 gun, properly positioned, could absolutely destroy light German tanks like the Panzer I and Roman II that comprised much of Guderian's force in 1941. The swampy terrain prevented German vehicles from maneuvering. The smoke from burning tanks obscured visibility. One skilled gunner with good ammunition and a perfect position could absolutely cause that level of damage. For 2.5 hours, the mathematics work, the tactics work. The story is almost certainly true. So what's the lesson here? What do we take from Nikolai Sirotinin's last stand? Maybe it's that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about choosing to stay when you could leave. Nikolai could have retreated with his commander, should have retreated, following orders, saving his own life. Nobody would have blamed him, but he looked at those 58 shells and made a different choice. He decided that buying time for his comrades to escape was worth more than his own survival. That's not stupidity. That's not fanaticism. That's sacrifice, conscious, deliberate, heroic. The Germans recognized it. They buried him with honors even though he'd killed dozens of their soldiers, because soldiers understand. When you see someone fight like that, die like that, you honor it, even if they are your enemy, especially if they are your enemy, because courage deserves respect regardless of the uniform. July 17, 1941. One 20-year-old factory worker, one 76mm gun, 57 German vehicles, 2.5 hours of hell, 11 tanks destroyed, 7 armored vehicles destroyed, 57 enemy dead, and one name that should never be forgotten, Nikolai Vladimirovich Sirotinin. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. There are dozens more incredible World War II stories that deserve to be told, and I'll be bringing you a new one every week. Drop a comment below. Could you have stayed and fought alone? Thanks for watching.